From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We're joined, as always, with our super producer, Alexis, codename Doc Holliday Jackson. Most importantly, you are here, and that makes this the stuff they don't want you to know. It's the top of the week, which means it is time to explore some strange news, some things that don't make it above the fold, as the old school journalists say, some things that will be important in the years to come, and some things perhaps explored in a way that hasn't been explored, even if it's been mentioned. We're going to talk about some kind of dark stuff today, so I wanted to kick off first with a disclaimer. The very first part of this week's segment may be graphic. It may not be appropriate for all listeners. If that is the case, don't worry. You can speed past. We have more stuff ahead, but we want to give you that heads up always when we're touching subjects of a sensitive nature. In terms of like good stuff, levity, I wanted to say, I don't know if you guys saw it, but justice has been done in that great maple syrup heist. They caught the guy. He's got to repay millions.
Thank God.
Wow.
That was a real sticky situation.
Mm-hmm. It sure was.
Good Lord.
I'm sorry.
Well, hey, just one
here.
other piece of levity here, except for one person, it's levity, and maybe their family. There was a teenager that was recently arrested because he posted a ton of photos and videos of himself online with weapons, just a ton of weapons, a ton of marijuana, and different types of cannabis, and a ton of just straight cash, and was just posting pictures of himself bragging about it. And he got pulled over because some local police kind of noticed his presence and just found him.
Wait, like on the internet? Like they saw his photo shoot and they were like, this guy's sus, we're going to follow him around?
I mean,
he's clearly
the pictures are pretty telling.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I'm sure. I mean, I know the type. I know the style. It's definitely a genre.
It's just a warning to everybody. Just, think before you post with your automatic or just regular weapons and drugs and money. Okay.
Yes.
Don't keep it in the
Social
car with
media
you.
literacy is a huge deal. Yeah. And try to have a little bit of OPSEC. Also, the last piece of levity I'll add is it looks like the 4-day work week is increasingly becoming true. So why are we telling you all this good news, folks? Because we want to avoid things being absolutely grim all the time. But there are very important things we have to talk about. We're going to talk about the world population. We're going to talk a little bit about the birds and the bees. We're going to set off with something that is maybe not necessarily unexpected to a lot of us in the audience, but has gripped the world, the Western world especially, of late. It seems that Russia is currently in an information war, specifically over the growing, overwhelming evidence of war crimes.
Yeah, and I brought this one to the table for today, but it's really something that has touched all of us, that we're all looking into and keeping up with, and it was just something I thought was worth discussing, in the early stages. I think first and foremost, it's important to note that Russia's advance, towards the government seat of Kiev in Ukraine, it's not going so well. It seems like that things are not going to plan. They've had to relinquish some areas and some territories that they held. They've been kind of forced out and have had to retreat. And what is now being discovered in areas that they once held, the Russian military once held, are growing signs of war crimes and atrocities. Specifically, I was bringing today the story of what's being found in the city of Bucha, which is not far off from Kiev. So that would be a very important key area to hold and then be able to push through to get to the capital city and then hold that, which is obviously a very important tactical goal for the Russian, what is it called, Ben? Special military operation?
Yeah, military operation. Don't call it a war.
I think special, though, is in there. Pretty sure special is in there.
Well, what isn't special, But I'm glad you're pointing this out, especially how close Bucha is. It's only about 30 kilometers northwest of the capital, and it's nowhere near the only place where these atrocities are occurring. Heads up, if there's interest in this is a full episode for us in the future as the fog of war lifts.
Absolutely. And we're really just going to kind of touch on some of the breaking news and then leave some of the deeper dive stuff to that episode that'll come a little down the line. But our buddies at Popular Front, that was actually the first place that I saw imagery of what's going on there. And you're literally seeing images of civilians, in street clothes, bound with their hands behind their backs, with evidence of point blank execution style gunshot wounds to their heads. There are signs of mass graves with, half poorly buried bodies, or you can just see like an arm coming up out of what looks basically like a sand pit. We have just alleys littered with more of these, bound bodies. And we've seen video evidence of there's a tactical road that from now I'm blanking on the name of it, Ben, you might be able to help me, but there's a very important road that leads to between two cities, and the Russians have kind of had to relinquish their hold on this location as well. But there is a video of Ukrainian civilians, I believe this is from some drone footage, fleeing this area in their cars and then getting out and raising their hands over their heads and then just being shot down. And it was a man and his wife who were traveling with their small child, who were both executed by Russian tank fire, if I'm not mistaken. There's a tank involved. So as Matt mentioned to me, to both of us and you as well, Ben, off the air, there are also some really terrible tactics being used in terms of coercion, in terms of interrogation. We are seeing evidence of torture and mutilation in some of these bodies, but also a component of sexual violence.
All of those things, especially the last one you mentioned, sexual violence, are far too common when it comes to militaries moving from one place to another, especially when there's a move out of a certain area. We see that very, very commonly, and at least we're seeing a lot of reporting coming out of Ukraine right now that are giving us details about this kind of terrible thing.
Yeah, there's a reason the term raping and pillaging is such a common term, when it comes to sacking of cities.
Yeah, this is one of the things that led the Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, to explicitly say on March 23rd, not too long ago, that the U.S. has determined Russia committed war crimes. So these are not all just on-the-street reporters doing fantastic work like Popular Front or Bellingcat. It's important to note that state powers have dug into this and made the same conclusions. And Matt, I would just say that unfortunately, sexual violence is often a regular occurrence. It's one of the primary war crimes that occurs. And it doesn't just happen when people are withdrawing. It happens when forces are going in. It happens when they were occupying. And it does not matter which army you're discussing. They've all have this terrible shadow upon their reputations. And the problem is that this stuff is not set to stop, but there's such tight information control over what the domestic Russian media is allowed to say and what the domestic Russian population is allowed to see. I can virtually guarantee you that many people in that country have a very different level of access to information about what's going on here in Ukraine.
Well, and the most terrifying part of it in terms of information control, I mean, it really does start to have like echoes of 1984, for example, There's this Reuters article that I was reading by Simon Gardner. In Ukrainian street, a corpse with hands bound and a bullet wound to the head is the name of the article. And every time it reports, or Simon reports on one of these findings, by Reuters reporters, there is a separate breakaway sentence that Reuters was not able to independently verify who was responsible for killing the dead residents, which is true. We did not see a Russian soldier executing these individuals. And Russia's defense ministry is, I don't know, kind of gaslighting the world, in my opinion, in making a statement Sunday saying, during the time that Russian armed forces were in control of this settlement, referring to Bucha, not a single local resident suffered from any violent actions. In fact, it adds that before Russian troops withdrew on March 30th, that they delivered 452 tons of humanitarian aid to civilians. So basically, they're saying they came in, wrecked shop. Whether they murdered innocent civilians or not, they definitely killed a lot of people, and of course, there's always going to be collateral damage, whether or not these are direct executions. And then they're saying, but look what we did. We gave them all this snacks or whatever. And the deputy mayor, Taras Shapravsky of Bucha, said that 50 of these dead residents were absolutely the victims of what they're referring to as extrajudicial killings that are carried out by Russian troops. And Shapravsky and the government of Bucha have officially declared an accusation of war crimes against the Russian military. But they're saying, nope, we didn't do that. And my question to you guys is, well, if they didn't do that, who did? These guys just happen to bind their own hands and fall into a point blank pistol death? I just don't, it's so obvious.
Well,
it's just kind of sad.
The issue is that it's good journalism to say that we cannot conclusively verify something.
Correct.
If they can't conclusively verify, yeah, that's correct. The issue is that there are mountains of footage, eyewitness reports, people who are saying what happened while also bearing the scars of what had happened. So even if they were making it up, that would mean they would have to be making up an airtight story that somehow explains physical damage. Also, the mayor is not making up the idea of 280 plus people in a mass grave,
right,
who are civilians. Where did they come from? We have to remember that in February, when this went hot, because it was brewing for a while, the official Kremlin's rationale was that they were denazifying Ukraine, and they were doing so as like a liberation movement for the good of the people. That reasoning has, of course, changed over time. But yeah, you can't explicitly say, we know folks are doing this as a journalist if you don't know for sure. But if you're another government, there's nothing to stop you, which is why the U.S. said, this makes sense to us. Right.
It really does feel like the thing that could be the tipping point of, getting some ally intervention on the ground. This is the kind of thing that led to intervention in World War II, when, not that this is necessarily directly akin to the final solution, but it is evidence of war crimes. And that does seem to be the moment when okay, I guess we got to do something about it because we don't want to be seen as the country that, turns a blind eye to war crimes of this nature. It's interesting. One last thing, Ben, you mentioned the denazification argument. I just got back from a trip to Berlin, and I went to the Stasi Museum, and I was very unaware of a lot of the minutia of the whole relationship between Russia and the U.S. and the Allied forces in liberating the concentration camps and essentially winning World War II. The Russians took massive losses in their, efforts to do that. And it was almost like, maybe I'm oversimplifying here, but it was like they got a portion of Germany, as the spoils of their victory. It almost it's like, okay, you guys did a good job. You guys have this. We'll have the rest. We'll keep an eye on it. Make sure the Nazis don't come back. So this precedent for denazification goes back to that. And that's sort of what they're leaning on here, right?
Yeah, there is a definite through line in that regard. There's no way around it. Russia was instrumental in World War II, and Russia, far more than many other countries, paid in blood. They paid in human flesh for that. And that's the idea then is kind of a call back to the concept of fighting Nazi forces. But, the Cold War started probably while World War II was ending, honestly.
Right.
So this, you have to be careful with that kind of ideological reasoning. It's always best to look at the resources first. You know what I mean?
There's also an interesting thing here. We use the term Nazi and Nazification because we've got a single regime that was bent on, grabbing world power, right? I think there can still be danger of a regime or group or set of groups, bent on some kind of global power, the same way that the Nazi regime would have, that doesn't, go around wearing the garb
Skulls.
of a Nazi or anything,
Right.
Anything. Yeah, exactly. The Mitchell and Webb, like, are we the enemies? No, we're not the baddies. No,
Yeah, we're the baddies.
I think it gets a little murky when you think about it that way, because what do
ironic,
they
too.
see as someone bent on world power?
That's right. Yeah. I
Tears for
it
Fears was
feels
right.
like Putin has designs on that level of domination. We don't know what's in his mind exactly, but it's sure starting to feel that way. In the same way, maybe in the early days of Hitler's, push for world dominance, it maybe, was a slow burn, but then you keep pushing, and then all of a sudden there's all this stuff that's been happening that nobody knows about. You never know.
Well, the difference,
just I don't know. The parallels and echoes are very creepy to me.
yeah, true. But I would posit there are two differences. There's one very big difference between Putin and Hitler, and that's Hitler was an opportunist who was a very, very bad military strategist. Like, he was not good at it. Putin, in his heyday, was quite talented. However, at this point, and they have, again, many, many other differences, but at this point, it's important to acknowledge that there is a non-zero likelihood that Putin himself is not getting the full reality of the situation from the people who are reporting to him up the chain of command. He might not have full visibility on what's happening. And that would explain a lot. And, it goes back into the longstanding speculation about his mental and physical health. Obviously, he's been pretty threatening to people in his command structure. And it might be an environment where you get kicked out or worse for being the bearer of bad news, which inevitably only leads to more chaos. Yeah. And of course, nobody is going to say they're the bad guys. Everybody wants to rule the world, and they have different opinions about how that should be done and what that means. But in their minds, and from their rational perspective, they're the best folks for the job, even when it's demonstrably untrue.
Does everyone really want to rule the world? It seems like an awful lot of responsibility and a lot of that was the thing I learned too about the DDR is it got to a point where they just couldn't, they let the wall come down because they couldn't afford it anymore. And I think it happened in a press conference where the DDR spokesperson was like, yeah, we're going to give up this vassal state or whatever. And the reporters were like, well, when? He's like, well, now. And it was literally because they couldn't carry the weight of it financially anymore to keep all of this information, hoarding and surveillance and all that stuff going. I mean, it had insane bureaucracy associated with all that stuff. It just seems like, why? If you're happy and you've got, your little piece of the world, why do you need to have everybody else's? It just seems like, I don't know. I know it's resources. I know it's a lot of things. I'm being a little naive, but I just don't quite get it. A lot of it seems to be based around things like ego and posturing. Not even like a lot of these decisions Putin's making seem to be very based on some very misguided kind of ideological weirdness and potentially some kind of sundowning stuff going on as well.
Yeah, there are a couple of books. We only named one on air, but there are a couple of books that have been instrumental in shaping those sorts of worldviews. And sometimes, after a certain point, if money doesn't matter to you, if you feel like you've got enough prestige, you start thinking about a legacy. And that's where it gets dangerous, when someone's, not in it for the money anymore. And we may be looking at a situation like that. I have a chunk of the Berlin Wall.
No way.
Yes, wait, Ted. Yeah.
There's a room where the light won't find you.
But I would be interested I would be interested for us to do an episode, not just on war crimes here specifically, but on what qualifies as a war crime, because the international legal understanding of this is a little bit different, I think, than what we would normally call war crimes.
Right. And it, but these, I think we can all agree that tying up a civilian and shooting them point blank in the head would classify as a war crime.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. 100%.
Well, with that, we're going to keep an eye on this story and plenty of stuff to watch develop and do a whole episode on this with that. It's going to have, I think, a lot of really interesting historical precedents and based on this little 15-minute chat right here. So I'm really looking forward to that. Even though it'll be dark and heavy, I think it's really important to talk about because we literally are living through history every single day. And it just seems to get weirder and weirder as we go along. But we're going to take a quick break and then come back with some more strange news.
And we have returned, folks. I can't wait to hear your input. As you know, you're the most important part of the show. So anytime you hear us talking about the really heavy things or the really weird things like strip chat, swank pods, always write in. Conspiracy at iHeartRadio.com, 1-833-STDWYTK. A lot of folks who are in the audience today, a lot of our fellow conspiracy realists have kind of lived with us a few hours a week over the course of the pandemic. When it hit, when everyone was in the depths of lockdown, when rumors proliferated and were often mistaken for research and science, and there were a lot of predictions people had. It seems weird to say this was, 2 years ago. 2-ish years ago, there were a lot of predictions people were making willy-nilly. Folks said, for instance, all kinds of stuff about how COVID could last on certain surfaces, etc. A lot of that turned out to be not true. Another prediction, there were a ton of economic predictions, right? Some of those were true. Some of those were false. One that turned out to be false was the prediction that was around for a while saying that housing prices and property prices would plummet. That turned out to be the opposite of the truth. And another prediction that I think a lot of people took on faith as factual was the idea that, hey, look, you've got these people who are in relationships and now they're all having to work from home or they're being stuck in their home due to the order of some large state actor, Big Brother. So what's going to happen is that they're going to reproduce. Right? Because what else are they going to do? They're not going out to that party. They're not going out to the movies. They got to do something to fill up the time. Oddly enough, that prediction turned out to be incorrect. And studies have shown over the end of 2021 and 2022, these ongoing studies have shown that the pandemic led to not a baby boom, but a baby bust for multiple factors. What we're seeing is quite possibly the beginning of an overall world population in decline. Now, I know that sounds crazy at first, but we have to think about the way the averages work out, right? So there are countries that already for a long time had lowering reproduction rates. And a country like Japan would be an example. The U.S. in specific had a pretty big baby bust. It wasn't as big as people had feared originally, but it did lead to a situation that people didn't think would really happen. One of the best articles reporting on this is not new, but it came out on August 30th, 2021 by Tanya Lewis for Scientific American. The pandemic caused a baby bust, not a boom. Like a lot of people thought, this would create a new, like we'd have the Panini babies, right? A new generation of kids who were born in a world where they kind of had to grow up in these enclosed environments for the first part of their lives until vaccines became a thing.
I call them the air fryer generation.
The air fryer generation. Can you make a panini in an air fryer?
Well, yeah, air fryer is just like, I was listening to some cooking show on NPR. And They were saying how the air fryer is like the Cuisinart of this generation because of all the like kids doing TikTok videos with air fryers. But it's actually a pretty silly machine. It's not. It neither fries nor uses air. I think it does use air, but it's popular with the kids.
Yeah. And the thing about this story, and any stories that are at a macro level like this, is that it's usually not just one factor. Like a big part of the lower birth rate in a country like the United States is due in part to harsh immigration laws. Countries typically increase their population based on a couple of things. A longer life expectancy over generations, right? So, your parents used to live to 70 and now everybody lives to 80, or something like that. Or there would be immigration laws that encourage new individuals to come into the population and increase it, hopefully for the greater good. Or a rise in birth rate. People start having more and more children, 3.2 instead of 2.5 and what have you. And there's a lot of really good research on the kind of Venn diagram that has to form with those factors and other factors to make something balanced, right? To make a population that is stable and maybe hopefully has slight growth. But that's not what is happening now. So it's, just to be clear, birth rates in a lot of the developed world or the industrialized world, they were already falling for a while. It is a known thing. And the U.S. is no exception, but pretty much most people thought that, hey, folks are amorous, and if you lock them up together, they're just gonna start breeding like rabbits, as the old cliche goes.
It's sort of the opposite of like a couple things happen in the opposite of what people might have predicted. Like I think because so many people were out of work and there was so much financial, iffiness that we thought people would not be buying houses and that there would be a housing bust. But instead there was a housing boom. And then the opposite happened where you would have thought there would be a baby boom, but there was this baby bust. It's like you can't predict this stuff. It's things have a way of having a life of their own,
Yeah, that's why I opened with talking about the housing stuff in the beginning, because I think those are two of the biggest predictions that people kind of got wrong. And a lot of folks were optimistic and thinking, hey, maybe this is the first year I can buy a house. But for anyone wondering why that still is such a struggle for so many people, check out our episode on foreign investment in the housing market. Check out our upcoming episode on investment companies, domestic investment companies or multinationals who are buying up entire suburbs and turn them into rental properties. Anyway,
I'm going through that right now, experiencing that firsthand, trying to find a place to rent. Find a place to rent, and they're all owned by Open Door or Zillow, whatever these companies are, and they're all houses that I was looking at to maybe buy one day, pie in the sky, and now they're all owned by a company and for rent.
I had I was going to have an appointment to look at this house that I liked. And the very next day I got a call back. Oh, sorry. They already sold it to a developer who made a cash offer. It's like, how do you compete with that?
They also waive the inspection. Yeah. No, waiving the inspection.
Oh, well, if they're a developer, they don't care about the inspection because you're just going to rent it and then they'll just take care of things piecemeal as you find a problem that's bad enough to report.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of why I've held off on some things too. I don't know, man. Maybe I'll just buy an RV and just live off the grid-ish. Anyhow, well, you can see multiple studies that indicate these trends and factor in all these variables that are affecting us here. But one thing that you can take from this is that these sorts of changes, even if they seem small in the short term, they have huge long tail effects, intergenerational stuff. If you think of let's say fewer people in the US are having children during the pandemic. Right now, we don't know how much of a shift that represents, because remember, population rates were already falling a bit. It could lead to an economic boom, like the Roaring '20s after the flu pandemic of 1918 hit. There was an economic boom, or it could lead to a system of two Americas. You could see families who were hit hard by the pandemic may be less likely to have children for quite a while, right? And this is not even talking about the great financial grift of student loans, right? And then you might see that there were people who were less affected, or maybe they were in an industry that benefited in some way from this pandemic, and they may be therefore more likely to have children. And then there's the third possibility that it just doesn't really matter. It's a little blip, the world moves on, and things just continue on their madcap capering dance to the end. But without going into stuff, I was interested in this. I read way too much about this. Also, I was learning that life expectancy has been affected. It's dropped just through the law of big numbers because of the deaths due to COVID and the demographics most likely to die from that infection or related things. This takes us to the thing that I wanted to ask you guys about. I wanted to see what your thoughts are. Do you know any pandemic babies? Know anybody who's been born during this time? Yeah.
Well, we know several people in the iHeart family and our friend groups who have had children, but it's probably not the same frequency that it just would have been on a regular year, or a regular couple of years. Guys, I've seen this movie before. It was in the form of a TV show. It was. Oh. Yes. It was that movie. It was also Utopia. I've seen this movie before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this
does it end well?
Well, you know,
depends.
You never know how much of the writing. How much of the writing is done by the actual writers, and then like the producers who come in with their opinions. But I walked down the street for that one. But in general, what may happen is that as the economy improves, there may be more children born because people were waiting. You have to remember, you know, if you're listening to this and you are of a certain generation, you have to remember the folks who are younger than you, they're the ones who are actually going through life uphill in the snow in this regard, because their wages have stagnated, the cost of everything imaginable has increased, and they're carrying burdens that didn't exist in the same way in previous generations. So if the economy turns around somehow, then we may see a baby boom, because people who have been postponing this stuff will all of a sudden say, hey, now we can afford a kid. Now we don't have to worry about practicing birth control. Now we will be able to ensure that we and our child or children have the kind of lives we would want them to have. And there may be more room. Let me just end on this. When I'm talking about big consequences, I'm talking about stuff that will become apparent that will become obvious in about 20 to 25 years. For instance, just consider this: the COVID-19 pandemic alone, and this is according to Population Development Review, reduced the world's collective life expectancy, everybody, by about 2 years overall. So this is big
stress
stuff.
Probably alone, right?
Well, because of stress, because of dying from COVID, because of COVID-related things. When the infrastructure fails, like this did hit everybody, even if you never contracted COVID, even if you never lost your job or felt influenced by it. Like this, the reason I say this is strange news is I would argue this is news that civilization has yet to understand, and probably will not for several years. We don't even know when the variants are going to stop. It's like DJ Khaled's in charge of these. You know what I mean? There's always another one. I make no apologies for that joke. However,
the man is quite prolific. It's true. There's no question about it. Well, he always has his name in the song.
DJ Khaled. No,
did I tell you my buddy Matt Riddle, friend of the show, early days of COVID, had the prescient idea to lock down the domain name DJ COVID-19. He's also playing a long game here, so you know.
Nice.
We'll see when that one comes around. He can sell that for a mint.
Yeah,
Nice.
big fan of Mr. Riddle. And we want to, at this point, I especially want to hear from new parents in the crowd. And I want to hear from folks who have made the decision to hold off from having kids, or to hold off from enlarging your family unit in one way or another, whether that's having additional children, whether that's adopting, what have you. What has your experience been? What advice would you have for other people who may be in a similar situation? And what do you think these sorts of rises and falls in birth rates and death rates, what do you think this means for the world overall, the world in which future conspiracy realists will hopefully grow up and hopefully succeed? Let us know, 1-833-STD-WYTK. You can also find us, conspiracy at iHeartRadio.com. And pause for a word from our sponsors, and we'll return with more strange news.
And we've returned. So guys, somebody explain to me how world population decline is a bad thing. I know we just did the whole segment. I feel like that's what the creators of the monuments want us to do, right?
Yeah. Well, right now it's crazy because it's an issue of inequality. You know what I mean? Like humanity, I've said it before, it's the worst group project ever, because you got all the stuff. You could give it to, like, everyone can be okay. It is a matter of logistics and arguably ideology, but everyone can be okay. A decline in human population, honestly, is better for every other living thing on the planet. Virtually every other living thing.
It needs to happen organically. We don't need to bring it about with some sort of weird, eugenics virus that we release, or genetically engineered mosquitoes
or vaccine. Anyway, cough. So,
Matt,
Mother Nature,
not.
If you believe in the Gaia hypothesis, then the planet cooks up its own kind of immune response, right?
Yes, exactly.
History, but
we all saw the happening. We know what goes on in those trees.
We all read the Bible. I mean, or most of it, the good bits anyway.
Yes,
the juicy bits.
I was joking there when I said the vaccine. That was a reference to Utopia, by the way. That is not me stating anything about the mRNA virus, the antiviral serum that we all took.
Doc, cut it out of context, Doc. We're keeping just that line.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
But you're going somewhere with this.
I'm going somewhere. So Ben, we talked in the last segment about people who are being responsible and making that choice. Like I choose to take the actions that will either allow me and my partner, whoever that may be, to have a child or to take on a new child to take care of, or not. Right? I'll make those choices if I don't want that. Not everybody does that. It doesn't always work out that way exactly, but there are things that humanity has invented in a pretty awesome fashion that can assist us in making those decisions if we want to have offspring at this very moment or not. Because as we also talked about, people like to get it on often with
Make
other
love?
people. Mm-hmm. Yep, sure.
The beast with two backs.
Yes, at least two. Mm-hmm. And historically, humanity has put it on those with ovaries to be the ones who actually have to take action to prevent pregnancy from occurring if intercourse is also happening, right?
Can I just say it, Matt? Can I just say, we say humanity, we're talking the patriarchy.
Sure.
Really?
We'll give
the social
give
construct of the patriarchy.
Yes, we'll give the pills that are hormonal in nature that do affect the person. We'll give them to those with ovaries. And I'm going to say it like that because I'm going to read from a Smithsonian Magazine article that refers to this new type of birth control we're going to describe as for those with testes. I think that's a really interesting way to refer to it as. So here it comes.
Oh, you naughty boy.
I'm sorry. That was so cheap. Wow. So cheap. God, we're not going to say that.
What?
We're not going to use that.
You don't want to leave that in?
All right, we can leave that in.
No half measures.
Thanks, man. Okay, here we go. The title is Male Birth Control Pill Expected to Start Human Trials This Year. Subtitle, The New Hormonal Pill Was 99% Effective at Preventing Pregnancy in Mice. It's written by Corinne Wetzel. It was posted on March 25th, 2022. And it describes a brand new pill that is being tested, which is non-hormonal and is meant to be taken by males, biological males, those who have testes, to prevent sperm production. And well, it's really to stymie sperm production, to lower it to levels where that person is effectively sterile while they are taking the pill. The pill allegedly, at least in the trials on mice, after it is not given, or if you're not taking the dose for about 6 weeks, that subject, that male, is now as virile as they were prior to taking the pill ever in the first place, so they can then sire babies. If this does work on humans, this would be an amazing alternative for everyone who has ever, any woman who's ever been on birth control, any person who's ever used a condom before, any person who's ever had sex and didn't want to get pregnant and used whatever method. This could be amazing because it would not only put the responsibility in those with testes hands, but it would the fact that it's non-hormonal means it's not going to disrupt the human in ways that current pregnancy prevention does, if that makes sense to you guys.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. And it's also reversible. So it's a lot of people with testes may balk at the idea of undergoing a surgical procedure like a vasectomy, right? Because
which is also reversible, but terrifying,
but much more difficult to reverse.
Difficult to reverse, and it is possible that there can be problems in both the initial vasectomy and a reversal, or you continue down the line of getting it done and then replaced.
Continue down.
Anybody colloquially referring to getting snipped is just not. That doesn't do it for me.
It feels a little casual. Feels a little casual. If it's someone who's received vasectomy saying that, then I'm like, all right, you earned it. You can be glib about it. But if there's someone, if you're talking with a doctor and they're like, well, just get the old snip, I would be like, you're a kind of a little casual for a doctor. But Matt, like these are still trials. So it's important for us to say, like, it's not something you can buy at your local Dwayne Reed or Crocodile Boot store today. But do they have any idea about when this might see the light? Like what kind of regulatory and testing hurdles does it have to go through? I imagine they're pretty extensive. Are they at human testing yet?
They're going into human testing this year. So clinical trials are going to begin. Testing.
Or human testes.
The testes will be tested. Yes.
The human testes.
Matt, you're bearing the lead here, though. The twist is you have to take it by shoving it directly into your pee hole.
No,
that's called sounding. That's a real thing. It's called sounding.
Nothing to do with this.
Just kidding.
For the record, to each their own. But I know about that.
It's just too good to be true. There has to be some sort of horrible side effect.
Real?
No,
sounding is a real thing.
Oh yes,
the
sounding is real.
The application of this that's the joke. But the idea is like it's a substance you consume orally, the way you would take a birth control pill.
Yes, precisely, exactly. And my understanding of it, at least as of this moment, it hasn't been packaged. It hasn't been shown as like this is how you take it. Where in many of the standard birth control pills that are available for women right now include that 1 week of sugar pills, because it is a hormonal cycle that anyone who begins birth control gets on the moment that you begin taking it.
Isn't that a positive feature of birth control, that it regulates menstrual cycles? Like I've heard it described as like something that's like good because it makes it more predictable.
This is not for me to describe. Is there anyone listening that has an opinion on birth control?
Oh, Yeah, I think that's the best way to do it, because well, we can't speak the three of us can't speak from an area of expertise, right? We can only speak at best secondhand. We're not even OBGYNs. So we can delve in and research statistics or something like that, but I haven't done that yet for this. It is worth hearing, but we also really love to hear experiential wisdom from people who have done this, different, because there are multitudes of different forms of birth control. There are also, there are a lot of resources out there. I'd like to shout out Stuff Mom Never Told You. They've done some great work on this, as well as friends of the show, Kristen and Caroline, the host of a non-iHeart podcast called Unladylike. So if you want more information about birth control for those with ovaries in particular, do check that out. And I know that's
I just want to see if Doc Holliday was going to jump in.
I think we were all waiting for that, but it was crickets.
No, actually, I will jump in. And I
awesome.
actually think that's a really valid point, because like a lot of people don't know this, and they automatically associate some of the more, conservative or like puritanical types associate birth control with promiscuity or like women trying to do something they're not supposed to be doing. But a lot of women get prescribed birth control for purely medical reasons, like menstrual regulation, like you said, Noel, and also like pain as it relates to like various conditions, like for example, endometriosis. So yeah, there's definitely way more reasons than just birth control for women to take birth control pills.
Boom.
Doc
Drop
Holliday,
the mic. Doc Holliday.
Conspiracy realist, classing up the place.
I wonder though, like, obviously it's in trial still. If there will be some unforeseen side effect, whether positive or negative, associated with it. Because if it's all good, sure seems like a winner, and putting a little more responsibility on the man, which typically is not the case.
Yeah, we were talking about this off air briefly, and Doc, Matt, and I were saying, we were talking a little bit about the story. I remember saying, I phrased it as a glass half empty, as a cynical person. I say, well, this feels like another way in which a lot of dudes will be less responsible. And you all would be very nice, positive, and say, well, they'll be more responsible, baby. But I ask you, how many, because they're out there, there are going to be sleazy, bad faith actors who are like, yeah, I took my pill earlier today. You can trust me. You know what I mean? Like we met at this Coachella concert. It's meant to be. People do. I just have.
I think there's room for that, Ben.
Yeah.
I think that's going to happen. You're right.
I'm hoping that still, despite that, I'm hoping that's a minority of people involved in those conversations, and I hope for the most part it makes things safer. It gives people more personal responsibility and more agency. Seems like the right thing to do, honestly.
There's a minor subplot in the show I May Destroy You, which I thought was absolutely brilliant. One of the best pieces of television I've ever seen in my life, where a character who's having like a one-night stand kind of with the main character secretly removes the condom, and it is essentially tantamount to rape. That is its own form of rape. And I never really thought of it that way, but it absolutely makes sense. And you're right, Ben, this could be a very, like, how do you show somebody that you're on the pill? You got to take your word for it. So,
well, yeah, that's a thing, and it's called stealthing, and it's absolutely a form of sexual assault. But also going back to what Ben said, if you meet somebody at Coachella and they're talking to you in that voice, maybe don't believe them.
Yeah.
Okay, I put my thumb on the scale of that example a little bit. I admit, I was maybe priming folks for that, but these are excellent points, and it really could, again, we have to say, we talked about this a little bit off air too. Birth control is not it's not going to prevent the spread of sexually transmitted diseases as well. And we don't need a Coachella guy. We don't need to make up a Coachella guy to talk about that
just
part.
Like Coachella guy. That's his little character. Even the character just writes itself, man.
Pretty sure it's Bonnaroo Bro you guys are mentioning, but I get it.
There's Bonnaroo Bro and Coachella guy, and they team up.
Charlie Coachella, and then Oh man!
And no offense to those organizations or concerts, they're both great.
No, we're not talking about the concert makers. Yeah.
But one more thing real quick,
yeah.
because I read a long time ago that the reason why they never really went anywhere with male birth control or like a male birth control pill is because of the amount of side effects that women experience, men wouldn't be willing to take them, like the nausea and different stuff like that. And so I definitely think that there's something to be said for this responsibility being shared equally. So I do think it's a glass half full thing.
I agree. And I will say there's already a little bit of a weird misogynist backlash popping up already. I saw like Snoop Dogg posted a meme where it was like a dude with like a really big ass, you know, and then it was saying that it was like, oh, side effects for that male birth control, bro, you know, and it was like, oh gross. Come on, Snoop Dogg. You're better than that.
Again, I have to reiterate, at least according to the team of scientists who are working at this, who are with the University of Minnesota. There's Dr. Gunda George, PhD, Abdullah Al-Noman, who is a graduate student who's working in that same lab. These are several people who have spoken about this and have spoken with the American Chemical Society. They are saying this is a non-hormonal pill. This will not have the kinds of side effects that the birth control for women currently has, because it is a hormonal pill. This one, if it does function in humans, acts by knocking out listen to this, retinoic acid receptor alpha. This is a protein in a family, quote, of 3 nuclear receptors that bind this acid, which is a form of vitamin A. And I'm just going to read directly from the article here. Quote, knocking out the RARA gene in male mice makes them sterile without any obvious side effects. At least that's what they say, without any obvious side effects. So who knows what possible side effects there will be in humans when those clinical trials get started, because this thing, RARA, it plays a role in cell growth, in differentiation, like cell differentiation, like what a cell ends up becoming. Like a sperm cell or some other type of cell, like a skin cell. So there may be weird side effects we haven't even thought about or considered yet that occur when people are on this pill, but we won't know until the people actually take it and we study those people.
For science. Yeah. And it'll have to be a longitudinal study at some point too, right? Like, is there some sort of damaging side effect that doesn't come out until decades later? And that's not a scare tactic. Don't be scared of this. It's just something, it's part of what good science should be doing. So look for it coming into a Crocodile boot store near you.
Crocodile boots, baby. By the way, it is called.
I'm sorry. Is this a reference? I don't understand what crocodile boots is. Is this like Buc-ee's, like in the Midwest? Is this like a thing with like a chain that I'm not aware of?
I'm just freestyling.
Plaza Fiesta. Okay.
I love it.
If you want to look it up, it is known as a non-hormonal male contraceptive, and it is known as, quote, YCT529. That's YCT529. You can look it up. You can read a little more about it, and hopefully we'll be hearing about it in a positive way in several months or maybe a year from now.
And with that, we can't wait to hear from you folks. Do you have experience on the ground, or do one of your loved ones have experience on the ground in Eastern Ukraine, in Russia? What is your take on the way the media is approaching the war crimes? We also want to hear what you think about world population. Obviously, just to put the cards on the table, we're fans of it declining, just to be honest with you. But what also do you think about the idea that this world population growth may also be slowed to a degree by the advent of male birth control? And what do you think overall about any of these? What do you think about all of these? Are you the guy who has to pay those millions of dollars for that maple syrup heist? We want to hear from you too. We try to be easy to find online. All you have to do is get on your phone or your internet browser of choice and hit us up at the following places.
Point your browser towards Facebook or Twitter or YouTube, where we exist under the handle Conspiracy Stuff. If Instagram is more your bag, you can find us under the handle Conspiracy Stuff Show. But wait, there's more. A telephone, you say? That's your preferred means of communication? We've got you covered.
That's right. Beep, boop, boop. 1-833-STDWYTK. Call it. When you call in, give yourself a cool nickname, and then you've got 3 minutes to leave a message. Let us know towards the end if we can use your name and message on the air, and your voice. Voice is important because that's how it's being conveyed to us. If you've got more to say than you can fit into that 3 minutes, why not instead just pre-order our book? What? You could do that? We have a book?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. It's called Stuff They Don't Want You to Know. You can pre-order it right now. Ben Bolin wrote it. Look at him.
It's true.
We all worked on it.
Beautiful.
We all worked on it. We know this could be something that could be sound like a broken record at some point, but again, there is a Honda Odyssey that parks outside of my house every time we're recording, and we will be shot if we don't mention pre-ordering the book. Shot with a gun.
Seeing these weird little glints coming from it, you know, like
the scope flare.
Definitely being watched. Yeah.
So, so with all that in mind, let us know what's going on in your neck of the global woods. Can't wait to hear from you, fellow conspiracy realists. There's one last way to contact us. You can drop us a line at our good old-fashioned email address, where we are
conspiracy@iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.